Hello, I'm here from Conservation Northwest's Citizen Wildlife Monitoring Project to share some tips and best practices for documenting wildlife with a remote camera trap. This video is a supplement to the written protocols and species-specific instructions available on Conservation Northwest's website, so be sure to refer to those for more detail and to get familiar with the protocols for your particular site. I'm ready to head into the field here with my camera, mounting straps, cable lock and key, a blank SD card, and fresh batteries. You'll also want a steel lockbox if setting up your camera in an area with likely human or bear activity. I also have a copy of the camera setup protocols, maps of my area, a blank datasheet and index card, and a GPS and digital camera to document wildlife sign. A smartphone can typically serve as both, and we recommend Gaia GPS as a free app to easily view GPS coordinates on your smartphone. Some camera setups also use bait or scent lures as attractants, and if you're traveling with these in bear country, be sure to carry bear spray with you. Camera installations near roads are unbaited to avoid attracting wildlife to areas with traffic. When setting up a new installation, you'll want to put a good amount of effort into researching your site. Know how to access it and the tracks, signs, and habitat preferences of your target species. On-the-ground scouting is then key to choosing your particular camera location. This could mean a full day or several days of scouting to detect elusive or wide-ranging species. Consider what landscape features might naturally attract or funnel wildlife, such as wetlands or stream corridors. Keep an eye out for game trails or track and sign of your target species, and avoid areas near human trails or campsites where at all possible. In some cases, you may have a reason to set a camera near a human trail or road. This is a common strategy for wolf camera sets, since wolves frequently travel old logging roads. For these setups, you should be careful to set the camera out of the natural line of sight to avoid detection and theft. This could mean pointing the camera away from the roadway towards where an attractant has been applied to dry animals off their typical travel route. That kind of setup also reduces the number of photos triggered by human traffic on the roadway. Or, if you're setting up the camera to view the road or trail, place it below eye level in a location that offers some natural concealment, but without obstructing the frame of view. As you hone in on a specific location, consider the practicality of setting a camera there. Is there a tree to securely attach your camera, offering an unobstructed view towards your target location? The tree should be big enough that it doesn't sway in the breeze, but not so big that you can't get your cable lock around it. If you're using a scent lure, you'll be looking for another tree or a rock or log about 10 to 15 feet away, sturdy enough to withstand animals rubbing or leaning against it. You can also bring an item in and place it in the frame, but you want to make sure that it won't easily be displaced by animals. You apply the scent to this object and angle your camera towards it. Otherwise, you'll aim your camera at the game trail or suspected travel corridor. In this case, you should aim the camera at a 45-degree angle to the trail to maximize your chances of capturing wildlife. For any of these situations, the ideal setup is north-facing. This avoids backlit photos and also prevents the camera from being triggered by the heat of the sun, which is an example of what we call a false trigger. A south-facing setup can also work, but you should try to avoid east and west-facing choices because the sun will then hit the camera when it gets low in the sky. If you find an otherwise perfect setup, it's okay to point your camera in that direction if all other indicators tell you that you should do that. You just want to monitor and make sure that you're not getting overexposed or backlit photos. False triggers can also be caused by branches, leaves, or brush blowing in the wind, and even a single plant in the foreground can quickly fill up a memory card. You should first and foremost work to find a site that's naturally open and offers an unobstructed view, but you might need to do a small amount of clearing to reduce false triggers. That could mean clipping back a single stem or a small branch, generally no more than that. Be especially diligent about removing vegetation from the foreground, including anything not currently in the frame that has the potential to get blown into it. Also, if you're setting up a camera early in the season, consider the potential for plant growth or spring snowmelt. Anticipate this in your setup or be ready to adjust it as conditions change. Here's an example of a site I've selected along a game trail. I like this spot because it's got this nice medium-sized Doug fir tree that I can attach my camera to, and there's a big leaf maple just opposite that would actually make a really good spot to add a scent lure if I do want to use an attractant. Now that I have my site selected, I can use the camera strap and Python cable lock to secure the camera. The height and angle of the camera are very important. It pays to be picky and invest some time in getting this setup right. Setting the camera at waist height and angling it toward the ground is a good starting point, but the only way to be sure is to test your setup. Most cameras have a test mode where a red light will flash as you walk back and forth in front of the camera, indicating that it would capture an image at the location where you're standing. Viewing some sample images from the camera trap is even better. Some camera models have a built-in review screen, but otherwise you can swap the SD card into a standard digital camera to see what you captured. Take a look and reposition your camera as needed. One thing I've noticed in testing out this setup is that I have way more space on this side of this tree in my frame than I really want. I really want to be capturing that trail that's way on the other side, so I'm going to adjust my camera in that direction and then test to see what that looks like once I'm capturing more of that side of this tree. I also experimented with different camera angles or tilts. You can use small sticks or pieces of wood to gently adjust the camera angle. The downward tilt puts more of the ground in my frame and will increase my chance of getting a full photo of an animal that's in the foreground. The upward tilt could make my setup almost useless, or at least mean I would fully miss capturing something like a fisher. I also experimented with different camera heights. Shifting the camera up the tree to about shoulder height would require an even stronger downward tilt, or otherwise I'm losing coverage of some of the foreground like you see here. When I bring the camera down to about 1.5 feet off the ground, I'm now only capturing footage from about my waist height down when I'm near the camera. That might do well if I'm only targeting smaller wildlife, but not so well for something the size of an elk. Here I'm back at a happy medium, a waist-high setup with a downward tilt to capture a variety of different animals. Now, after all of that testing, be sure to move the SD card back into your camera trap, check the settings, and turn it on before you walk away. The last thing you should do is step in front of the camera to trigger a photo of your team and take an index photo. You'll hold up a card about 2 to 4 feet from the camera that shows the installation name, date and time, and latitude and longitude in decimal degrees. It helps to shade the card and write in dark marker. You also have a field data form to complete, and it helps to complete this while you are in fact in the field. You'll want to take particular note of your arrival and departure time from your site, as well as documenting any wildlife track or sign found at your site. You'll fill one out and take an index photo for every revisit to your camera as well. For the installation datasheet, include details about the location and access for people who will be servicing the camera. That includes you and any future team members or other teams that may come to this site. Photos of the area and the approach could help too. You might consider placing flagging tape at a key junction to guide you back to the camera, but you shouldn't rely on this and you should be careful not to give away your location. If navigation to your camera site is really tricky, you can record a GPS track of the travel route on Gaia GPS or a similar app and then share it with your team. You can also plug in the GPS coordinates to Gaia and then use the Navigate feature to return to your site. Most teams will have 2 camera traps to deploy in their assigned area, so once you've gone through this whole process once, you'll get to do it a second time. Besides for specific wolverine setups, aim to place the cameras at least 1 kilometer apart and in distinctive habitats. For monitoring along the Interstate, for example, you could place them on opposite sides of the road, or one on a trail leading towards the highway and the second in a more distant location. Also know that we're targeting some large wilderness areas and trying to find animals that have very large ranges. So don't be disheartened if you're not capturing that elusive species on your first month out. It could be 6 months or 8 months until you get that kind of payoff. And with that, we've covered all the basics of camera trap installation. Thanks so much and have a great tracking season.